I think there's also this misconception that there's no alienation if you are in power, or one experiences no kind of alienation or no sense of alienation if you have quote unquote material power, which I think is a flaw in the argument.
Yeah, well, it's an interesting weakness, I would say, of socialist arguments in general, is that there's a tremendous critique of the structure of the economic system, but there's also the presupposition that if you just had enough money, you'd be doing, things would be much better for you. And
right.
They would be somewhat better in some ways. You know, we have to be clear about that.
Up to a certain point.
Yeah. Well, and there's also problems that money doesn't solve, many.
Right.
And there's, it would be lovely if material security actually produced full security, but it doesn't. So, okay. So we seem to be reasonably in alignment about that. So now, practically speaking, tell me what you're doing and how often you're called on. So the corporate world has become rife with DEIs, but DIEs, how I like to phrase it, because I'm not very happy about it. The notion of this catchphrase, diversity, inclusivity, and equity. And there are training programs everywhere to hypothetically increase people's awareness of those and their proper behavior. And I think the evidence that those programs work is extraordinarily weak, and there's a fair bit of evidence that they're actually counterproductive, which I find more compelling, but perhaps not. But that's the practical landscape for your activities at the moment. Is that correct? You're working essentially as a consultant as well as a writer?
Primarily as a consultant. I do some writing here and there, but it's primarily consulting. And, people can basically either enroll in our online course, which we have, or companies can bring us in to facilitate workshops that elucidate the essence of the course, or kind of serve as an appetizer or a teaser to the course.
Okay, so how are you marketing that? How successful are you? Why do you think it works? Practical questions, because there's obviously a huge market for this. So why your thing? And why are you sure that you're not doing harm, just out of curiosity?
Oh, yeah, that's a great question. I'll try to answer the first few questions first. So we've actually had no outbound marketing strategy to date. Everything has kind of been organic. So basically, I've been interviewed by a number of different publications and on a number of different podcasts. And those are the things that drive people to discover the theory of enchantment. There's been no paid marketing outside of, just me showing up on a podcast to talk about these ideas. And one of the other drivers, so we have that piece, but the other piece is that a lot of companies are bringing in these more toxic diversity and inclusion programs, and they're wreaking havoc in the workplace. They're actually causing... Justify that claim, because that's a pretty radical claim that they're wreaking havoc. Those are fighting words, let's say. Yeah. So why do you believe that? What's your evidence for that? So I have been told by folks on demo calls that we have with potential clients, I've been told these stories about how they bring in very specific diversity and inclusion programs where people are encouraged to segregate themselves based upon skin color. Their lived experiences are assumed because of their skin color. And this ends up fostering a kind of resentment on the part of people of all different races and all different ethnic backgrounds. And it also ends up fostering a kind of animosity between peoples of different backgrounds and ethnicities. And so then these companies end up looking for a kind of balm or kind of remedy to actually fix that problem. And
BALM bomb, not BOMB bomb.
No. A softer version.
Yes, exactly.
But they're looking for some kind of medicine to fix the situation that they unwittingly brought in and didn't, were totally oblivious to.
Okay, so that's your typical experience, is that you're being brought in after the DEI process has resulted in an unpleasant outcome.
Yes, it's either that or an individual or a group of individuals in an organization. They're being told that this is the way to do diversity and inclusion, but it's not sitting well with them. They feel intuitively that something's off, it doesn't speak to them. And then they go out and search for alternative approaches. And then they may come across theory of enchantment.
Okay. So I wanted to touch on something that you mentioned about the DEI process, the idea that it's another one of these propositions that's worthy of investigation, the validity of lived experience. Now, you would say, well, are you an authority? Are you an unquestionable authority on the nature of your lived experience? And the answer to that is yes and no. It's the same as those other questions that we discussed, because there's obviously a domain of subjective experience that you have unique access to, about which, in some sense, I can say nothing. Like, if I see that you're in pain, if you tell me you're in pain, I can decide whether I believe that or not. I can decide whether or not that is a credible claim as far as I'm concerned, but I cannot tell ever exactly the nature of your experience. And so, in some sense, you are an expert, an incontrovertible expert on some aspects of your experience. So that part of the claim is valid. The question is, well, what's the universalizing significance of that? And so just because it's true for you doesn't mean it's true for everyone. Just because it's true for you doesn't mean that it's true for all people who share any particular element of your immutable characteristics. All of the rest of that is questionable. But a lot of these claims fly because, well, they're true in some sense. You could say, well, is the U.S. structurally racist? Well, it was set up for the benefit of the people who set it up, fundamentally. So, in some sense, all cultures are set up to benefit particularly the people who set them up. And then if there's other people who come in, well, you know, they have a harder time of it. And is that structurally racist? It's like, well, yes and no. But the no is important to assess as well as the yes, right? To get an even-handed take on these and also to find out how universal this is or how particular it is to that particular country. Like all countries are set up for the benefit of a relatively homogenous group, because otherwise it's not a country. If it isn't homogenous, people aren't playing the same game, right? So the fundamental problem is homogeneity versus heterogeneity. That's a really deep problem, you know, because the problem is, well, how do we all get along together and play nice, like children, civilized children in the playground, while simultaneously being quite different from one another at all sorts of levels of analysis? It's a huge problem.
Well, this is the essence of the American project, which is ultimately a conundrum, right? Because our motto is e pluribus unum, out of many one, which is actually an incredibly difficult thing to accomplish, given the human condition. And so I would say that America is different, quite different from many other countries in the sense that it does hold this up as its motto, as its ideal to which it aspires to. But it also simultaneously has this very storied history of not just having a homogenous culture in the typical sense of the word, but of course also in perpetuating, you know, systemic cruelty against the other. In this case, speaking particularly of African Americans. So you have these two warring trends or histories within the American system, which makes this question of how to have these civilized children playing together a deeper question and a more difficult question to solve, because America holds itself up as having this model, or having this ideal rather, of out of many, one.
Are you tired of being held back by one-size-fits-all healthcare? Of having your concerns dismissed or being denied that comprehensive lab work you need to truly understand your health? I want to tell you about Merrick Health, the premier health optimization platform that's revolutionizing how we approach wellness and longevity. What sets Merrick apart isn't just their cutting-edge diagnostic labs or concierge health coaching, it's their commitment to treating you as an individual. Their expert clinical team stays at the forefront of medical research, creates personalized, evidence-based protocols that evolve with you. Unlike other services that rely on cookie-cutter solutions, Merrick Health goes the extra mile. They consider your unique lifestyle, blood work, and goals to craft recommendations that actually work for you, whether that's through lifestyle modifications, supplementation, or prescription treatments. And with a remarkable 4.9 out of 5 rating on Trustpilot, you know you're in great hands. The best part is you can get 10% off your order today. Just head to merrickhealth.com and use code Peterson at checkout. That's merrickhealth.com, code Peterson for 10% off. Stop guessing and start optimizing your health today with Merrick Health, because your best life starts with your best health.
Right. Well, it's a great ideal if you can manage it, because you get all the benefits of diversity, which means, and so we can talk about diversity. Why do you want diversity? Well, because how do you know you're right? And maybe you're not, and someone who thinks differently than you might have the key to solving the problem, and you might really need that solution. So that's another issue about the diversity mantra. It's like, well, yes, diversity, but then we might want to specify, well, let's really think hard about what we mean here with diversity. And, I'll speak psychologically. I think the best way to conceptualize diversity across human beings is certainly not racial. I think that's an appalling proposition. You can certainly conceptualize diversity usefully in terms of personality. And we have a pretty good taxonomy of personality. It's not perfect, but, extroverts have their utility and introverts have theirs, and highly creative people can be great entrepreneurs, but they're very easily scattered, and it's burdensome to be interested in everything, let's say.
Yes.
Agreeable people are compassionate and warm, but it's easy for them to get resentful. Disagreeable people are competitive and rather blunt, and so they can be hard to get along with, but they'll tell you what they think, and so that's useful, et cetera, et cetera. And so we wouldn't have that 5-dimensional diversity of human beings if there weren't ecological niches for all of those combinations. So you can see built
what do
right
you
into.
mean by that?
Well, sometimes the best thing to be is an extrovert. So imagine you're like extroverted and really low in negative emotion. So you don't have much fear and you're out there. Well, you're probably a target in an authoritarian state.
Yes.
Because you just won't shut the hell up and you're not afraid.
Yeah.
Right? So being an emotionally stable extrovert, that's a lot of fun. There's a lot of positive emotion, but you're a performer. You're not going to hide. And so maybe the introverted neurotic who is hiding at home was much more likely to survive, and so on and so forth. And you can walk through all of the traits and say, well, in this situation, that trait is more appropriate. In this situation, that trait is more appropriate. We need the diversity that feeds our and all of those intrinsic differences shape the way we think as well. I mean, extroverts think like extroverts and so on. And you see that effect even in political affiliation, at least to some degree.